Amy Carter stared at the screen in front of her. The numbers did not change no matter how many times she blinked. F-tier, lowest combat capability. The words glowed in red letters across the display panel. Around her, 200 other recruits checked their own results. Some cheered, others groaned. A few remained silent like her, but none of them had scores as low as hers. The testing hall sat in the center of the Galactic Defense Academy, a massive station that orbited Earth. Through the wide windows, Amy could see her home planet turning slowly below. She had traveled 3 months to get here. 3 months on a transport ship with failing engines and recycled air that smelled like metal. Commander Helen Brooks walked between the rows of recruits. She was a tall woman with gray hair pulled back tight. Scars ran across her left cheek from battles Amy had only read about. The commander stopped at each station, glancing at the results. When she reached Amy's station, her eyes narrowed. She tapped the screen twice as if checking for errors. "Carter, is this correct?" Commander Brooks asked. "Yes, ma'am," Amy said quietly. The commander looked at her for a long moment. "You understand what F-tier means?" "Yes, ma'am. It means I scored lowest in physical strength, aggression response, reaction time, and tactical thinking." "That's right." Commander Brooks moved to the next station. Her voice carried across the hall. "All recruits will complete basic simulation training regardless of tier ranking. Academy policy does not allow exceptions." Someone laughed. Amy did not need to turn around to know it was Jake. He had scored a tier, one of the highest in the class. He made sure everyone knew it. "Hey, Carter," Jake called out. His voice was loud and meant to be heard. "Maybe you should try the cooking division instead. I hear they need people who can't fight." A few others laughed with him. Amy kept her eyes on her screen. The red letters still glowed, F-tier. "Shut it," said another voice. This one was female, tired but kind. Hudson stood 2 stations away. She had scored B-tier and could have ignored Amy completely. Most B-tier recruits did not talk to F-tier ones. But was different. She had been Amy's roommate for the past 2 weeks. She shared her extra food rations when Amy's colony credits ran low. She never asked why Amy was so quiet all the time. The testing hall began to empty. Recruits filed out in groups based on their tier rankings. The A-tier recruits went first, talking loud and confident, then B-tier, then C-tier. The pattern continued down. Amy waited until the hall was almost empty. She stood slowly and walked toward the exit. Her boots made soft sounds on the metal floor. "Amy, wait up," jogged to catch her. "Don't listen to Jake, he's an idiot." "He's right, though," Amy said. "My scores were terrible." "Scores don't tell the whole story," smiled, but it looked forced. "You'll do fine in the simulations." Amy did not answer. She had learned a long time ago that arguing was a waste of energy. People believed what they wanted to believe. Scores and numbers made sense to them. Everything else was just noise. They walked through the curved corridors of the academy. Other recruits passed them, some staring at the F-tier badge on Amy's uniform. The badge marked her as bottom tier. It was supposed to motivate people to train harder. Mostly it just made them targets. "Want to grab some food?" asked. "I'm going to the simulation bay," Amy said. "Now, training doesn't start until tomorrow." "I know, I just want to see it." Looked confused but nodded. "Okay, I'll see you back at the room later." Amy continued alone. The simulation bay was 3 levels down, past the medical wing and the officer quarters. She had studied the station maps every night since arriving. She knew where everything was located. Knowing the environment was survival rule number 1. The bay was empty when she arrived. 20 simulation pods lined the walls, each one big enough to hold a person lying down. They looked like medical beds with thick glass covers. Cables ran from each pod into the walls, connecting to the massive computers that ran the training programs. Amy walked to the nearest pod. She placed her hand flat against the glass. It was cold and smooth. Through it, she could see the padded interior and the neural interface helmet. The simulations were supposed to be realistic. They connected directly to your brain, making you believe you were really in combat situations. The academy claimed it was safer than live training, but just as effective. Some recruits who had tried the pods said it felt completely real. Pain, fear, exhaustion, everything. Amy traced her fingers along the edge of the glass. She had read all the technical manuals about the simulation system. She understood how the programs worked, how they generated enemies and scenarios based on your tier ranking. F-tier recruits got easy scenarios, survival exercises, basic problem solving, nothing too hard. The system was designed to build confidence slowly. But Amy did not need easy. Easy was not what she had trained for her entire life. She thought about home, the colony on 442B, the settlement of 200 people trying to survive on a world that did not want them. The automated defense systems left over from wars nobody remembered. The drones that hunted anything that moved. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. "Stay calm, Amy. Panic kills faster than bullets. Watch the patterns. Everything has patterns." Amy had been 7 years old when the first drone found their settlement. She remembered hiding in the basement while explosions shook the ground above. Her grandmother had stayed calm the whole time, working on calculations, finding the pattern in the drone's patrol route. For 15 years, Amy had lived like that, learning to think while fear tried to shut down her brain, learning to see systems instead of threats, learning that survival meant being smarter, not stronger. The Academy's tests did not measure that. They measured aggression and quick reactions. They measured whether you could punch hard and move fast. They measured warrior instincts that Amy had never needed. Recruits aren't allowed in here without supervision. Amy turned. Lieutenant Morgan stood in the doorway. He was young for an officer, maybe 30. His uniform was perfect, every crease sharp. "Sorry, sir," Amy said. "I was just looking." He walked closer, glancing at her badge. His expression changed when he saw the F-tier marking. "You're Carter, the one with the record low scores." "Yes, sir." "Why are you here?" Amy thought about lying. She could say she got lost or was just curious. But lies took energy to maintain. The truth was simpler. "I wanted to see what I'll be facing tomorrow, sir." Lieutenant Morgan crossed his arms. "You know the simulations adjust to your capability level. You'll get appropriate challenges for F-tier." "I understand, sir." He studied her face like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "Most recruits with your scores either quit or get sent home after the first week. What makes you think you'll be different?" Amy looked back at the simulation pod. The glass reflected her face, pale and calm. She looked small in her uniform. She looked weak. She looked exactly like someone who deserved an F-tier ranking. "I don't think I'll be different, sir," she said quietly. "I just need to try." Lieutenant Morgan shook his head. "Admirable, I suppose, but determination doesn't overcome biology. The tier system exists for a reason. It measures real capabilities." "Yes, sir." "Get some rest, Carter. Tomorrow will be harder than you think." He turned and left the bay. Amy stayed a moment longer. She looked at her reflection in the glass again. Small, weak, lowest tier. She had been underestimated before. It had kept her alive. She touched the pod one more time, then left the bay. The corridors were quiet now. Most recruits were in the mess hall or their rooms. Amy walked slowly back to her quarters. Was already asleep when Amy entered. She moved quietly in the dark, changing into sleep clothes and lying on her narrow bed. Tomorrow she would enter that pod. Tomorrow everyone would watch her fail just like they expected. The briefing room smelled like coffee and nervous sweat. Amy sat in the back row with 3 other F-tier recruits. 2 were aliens from peaceful species she did not recognize. The third was a human man who kept bouncing his leg up and down. Lieutenant Morgan stood at the front, a holographic display floating beside him. "Today's exercise is a basic survival scenario. You will be placed in a hostile environment with limited resources. Enemy drones will hunt you. Your objective is simple: survive as long as possible." He tapped the display. Numbers appeared. Average F-tier survival time is 8 to 12 minutes. If you make it past 15, you pass the exercise. If you need to exit early, press the emergency release. The pod will open immediately. Jake sat in the observation gallery above them. Amy could see him through the glass wall, leaning back in his chair with his arms crossed. A dozen other A-tier recruits surrounded him. They were taking bets. She could not hear them, but she knew what they were betting on. How fast she would fail. "Carter, you're up first," Lieutenant Morgan said. Amy stood and walked to the simulation pod. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was normal. She felt the same way she always felt before something dangerous, calm and focused. The pod opened with a hiss. The interior was padded and comfortable. Amy lay down and the neural interface helmet lowered over her head. Small nodes pressed against her temples and the back of her skull. "Remember," Lieutenant Morgan's voice came through speakers, "this will feel real. Pain receptors are dulled but not eliminated. Try not to panic." The glass cover closed. Darkness surrounded her for 3 seconds. Then light exploded across her vision. Amy was standing on a barren planet. Red dust covered everything. Jagged rocks jutted from the ground like broken teeth. The sky was orange and filled with dark clouds. Wind howled past her ears. A countdown appeared in her vision. 10 seconds until the drones activated. Amy did not run. Running without knowing where to go was how people died. Instead, she turned slowly in a circle, scanning everything around her. Rock formations to the north, larger ones with caves or at least shadows, a dried riverbed to the east deep enough to provide cover. West was open ground, no protection. South had scattered boulders but nothing significant. The countdown reached 0. A high-pitched whine filled the air. Amy looked up. 3 drones appeared in the orange sky, black against the clouds. They were small, maybe half a meter across, with multiple rotors and sensor arrays. They spread out, beginning a search pattern. In the observation gallery, Jake leaned forward. "She's just standing there. Is she frozen?" On the screens, Amy's vital signs showed steady. Heart rate, 70 beats per minute. Respiration, normal. Neural activity, high but controlled. Lieutenant Morgan watched closely. Most recruits panicked in the first 30 seconds. They ran immediately, making noise and drawing attention. This girl was doing something different. Amy picked up a rock. She weighed it in her hand, then threw it hard toward the dried riverbed. It clattered down the slope, bouncing off other rocks. 2 drones immediately changed direction, flying toward the sound. While they investigated the noise, Amy moved, not running, walking quickly but quietly toward the rock formations in the north. She kept her profile low, using the scattered boulders for cover. The 3rd drone continued its search pattern, scanning in a grid. Amy watched it, counting the seconds between each sweep. 15 seconds per area, predictable. Everything machine-made was predictable. She reached the rock formations and pressed herself against the largest one. The stone was warm from the planet's sun. She could feel her heart beating against it, steady and calm. 5 minutes had passed. In the gallery, the other recruits were quiet now. One of the alien observers spoke in a language that translated through their devices. "The human is not following standard FDR behavior patterns." Commander Brooks had entered the observation deck. She stood behind Lieutenant Morgan, arms crossed, watching the screens. The 2 drones that had investigated the noise returned to their search pattern. They were closer now, scanning the rock formations. Amy could hear their rotors clearly. She looked at the ground around her. Broken rocks, red dust, pieces of what might have been old metal corroded and half buried. She picked up a piece of metal about as long as her forearm. One end was sharp. The drones moved in a coordinated pattern. They communicated with each other wirelessly, sharing information about cleared areas. This meant they had a central processing node somewhere, probably in the lead drone. Amy waited. Patience was cheaper than energy. Her grandmother had taught her that. 10 minutes passed. A drone flew directly over her position. Its sensors swept across the rocks. Amy did not move. She had positioned herself in a shadow where the rock overhang blocked most angles. The drone's scan showed nothing, and it moved on. When it passed, Amy emerged from cover. She did not go back toward open ground. Instead, she climbed higher into the rock formations, using natural handholds. The vantage point gave her a clear view of the area. She could see all 3 drones now, tracking their movements. They were flying in an expanding spiral pattern, covering more ground but leaving gaps in their coverage. Gaps she could exploit. Amy found a narrow crevice between 2 large rocks. She wedged herself inside and began working. Using the sharp piece of metal, she loosed smaller rocks from the crevice walls. She stacked them carefully in a specific arrangement. 15 minutes. In the observation deck, Lieutenant Morgan checked his displays twice. "She's still going. No signs of panic, no errors in judgment." "What is she doing?" Jake asked. On the screen, Amy was arranging rocks in what looked like a random pile. Commander Brooks leaned closer. "I'm not sure, but it's not random." 20 minutes. Amy had built a small wall of rocks that funneled into a narrow opening. She placed the sharp piece of metal at an angle in the opening, wedged tight between stones. Then she climbed back down to ground level. She found another rock and threw it toward the eastern riverbed again. Harder this time. It made a loud crack when it hit. All three drones converged on the location. While they searched the riverbed, Amy ran to a different rock formation, not the one where she had built her trap, a different one further south. She positioned herself in clear view and waited. The drones finished their search. They rose into the air, resuming their patterns. Then one spotted her. Its sensors locked on. The other two drones received the signal and turned toward her position. All three began approaching, moving faster now. They had found their target. Amy ran, not frantically, in a specific direction toward the rock formation with her trap. The drones followed, maintaining formation. They were hurting her, cutting off escape routes. It was efficient programming. Amy reached the rocks and climbed fast. The drones accelerated, closing the distance. They were armed with small, stunning weapons, designed to incapacitate without killing. She squeezed into the crevice, into the narrow opening between her stacked rocks. The lead drone followed. It was small enough to fit through the opening. Its rotors hummed as it entered the confined space. It hit the angled metal piece at full speed. The sharp edge caught its central rotor assembly. The rotor shattered. The drone spun wildly and crashed into the rock wall. Sparks flew from its damaged core. The other two drones tried to follow, but the opening was blocked by their destroyed leader. They hovered outside, sensors trying to track Amy's position. But Amy was already moving. She had left the crevice through a different opening, one too small for drones but large enough for a human. She climbed higher, reaching the top of the formation. From above, she could see the two remaining drones searching for her below. They were confused. Their coordination was broken without the lead drone. 30 minutes. Amy picked up rocks and began dropping them, not randomly. She aimed for specific points where the drones would be based on their search patterns. The first rock missed. The second caught a drone's sensor array, cracking it. The drone wobbled but stayed airborne. She kept dropping rocks, patient, methodical, watching the patterns. 40 minutes. Lieutenant Morgan was standing now. This is impossible. FDR recruits don't last this long. The program should have adapted by now. Look at the neural readings, Commander Brooks said. Her brain activity is distributed differently than normal recruits. She's processing multiple timelines simultaneously. On the screen, Amy had climbed down and was approaching the damaged drone. It was trying to maintain altitude with a broken sensor. She grabbed it from below, pulled it down, and smashed it against a rock. It stopped functioning. One drone remained. It changed tactics, rising higher into the sky where rocks could not reach it. It began scanning in a wider pattern. Amy watched it. She timed its sweeps. Then she did something that made everyone in the observation deck lean forward. She walked into open ground, completely exposed, just standing there. "What is she doing?" Jake whispered. The drone spotted her immediately. It dove toward her, weapons charging. Amy waited. Her hands hung loose at her sides. Her expression was calm. The drone got closer. 50 meters, 40 meters, 30 meters. At 20 meters, Amy moved. She dove behind a boulder, but not quickly, almost slowly. The drone fired. The stun blast hit the ground where she had been standing, but the shot was more powerful than standard. It cracked the boulder, sending fragments flying. The drone's power core flickered. It had used too much energy on that shot. Standard drones were programmed to conserve power, but this one had been baited into wasting it. Amy emerged from cover. The drone tried to fire again, but its weapons were recharging. It began to retreat, flying back toward higher altitude. But it was too slow now. Its power was depleted. It made it 15 meters up before the charge ran out completely. It fell from the sky and crashed into the red dust. 50 minutes. Amy stood alone on the barren planet, all three drones destroyed. The simulation was supposed to end when the drones were eliminated or when the recruit failed, but nothing happened. The environment continued. Then something new appeared in the sky. 5 more drones, larger ones. In the observation deck, alarms started beeping. Lieutenant Morgan's face went pale. The simulation is escalating. It's generating additional challenges. That's not supposed to happen during basic exercises. Can you stop it? Commander Brooks asked. Not without forcing an emergency shutdown. That will corrupt her neural interface. They watched as Amy looked up at the new drones. For the first time, her expression changed, not to fear, to interest. She smiled slightly and began walking toward a new rock formation. 70 minutes. The simulation ended at 89 minutes when Amy disabled the command node that was generating the drones. She found it by tracking the signal patterns and following them to their source. The designers had hidden it inside a cave system, never expecting an F-tier recruit to survive long enough to search for it. The pod opened. Amy sat up slowly. Her hair was damp with sweat. Her hands had small cuts from the sharp rocks, even though they were simulated. The neural interface made everything feel real. Lieutenant Morgan helped her out of the pod. That was impossible, he said quietly. Amy looked at him. The pattern was obvious once you stopped reacting and started observing. The observation gallery was completely silent. Jake's mouth hung open. His bets were lost. Commander Brooks came down from the observation deck. She looked at Amy for a long moment. How did you know the drones would respond that way? All machines follow rules, Amy said. You just have to figure out what the rules are. And the command node. The drones had to be getting instructions from somewhere. I tracked the signal timing and followed it. Commander Brooks nodded slowly. Go get cleaned up, Carter. We'll talk more later. Amy walked toward the exit, was waiting in the corridor, her eyes wide. Amy, that was incredible, said. Amy just shrugged. It was easier than I thought it would be. News traveled fast on a military station. By the next morning, every recruit knew about Amy's simulation run. Some claimed she had hacked the system. Others said it was a malfunction. Jake told anyone who would listen that the simulation had been set too easy. But the numbers did not lie. 89 minutes, 3 drones destroyed. Command node located and disabled, all from an F-tier recruit. Commander Brooks called Amy to her office at 800 hours. The office was small and efficient, with screens covering 2 walls. Data scrolled across them constantly. Recruit scores, station operations, fleet movements. Sit, Brooks said, without looking up from her tablet. Amy sat in the metal chair across from the desk. She kept her hands folded in her lap, waiting. Brooks finally looked at her. I reviewed your assessment scores. Do you know why you ranked F-tier? Yes, ma'am. Low aggression response, insufficient competitive drive, minimal stress hormone elevation. Those metrics were developed by the Empire. They measure combat capability based on predatory instincts. Brooks set down her tablet. Your scores were low because you don't respond like a predator. You respond like a survivor. Amy said nothing. I also read your background file, the full one, not the summary. Brooks leaned forward. 442B, 15 years under constant threat from automated defense systems. Your settlement lost 47 people during that time. You were there for most of it. Yes, ma'am. Why didn't you mention this during your entrance interview? They didn't ask, ma'am. Brooks almost smiled. Almost. Fair enough. Here's why I called you here. I'm assigning you to an advanced combat simulation, the one we use for A-tier and B-tier recruits. Amy's expression did not change. When, ma'am? Today, 1400 hours. Brooks stood and walked to one of the screens. She pulled up a simulation profile. This is not a survival exercise. This is full combat. Multiple objectives, adaptive enemies. It lasts 3 to 4 hours on average, and most recruits complete 60 to 70% of objectives. I understand, ma'am. I'm not sure you do. Brooks turned back to her. This simulation has injured recruits. Broken bones, neural shock, psychological trauma. The pod can make you believe you're dying. Your brain does not know the difference between simulation and reality. Yes, ma'am. Brooks studied her face. The girl showed no fear, no excitement, just calm acceptance. It was unsettling. You can decline, no one would blame you. I'd like to try, ma'am. Why? Amy thought for a moment. Because you're giving me the chance. Brooks nodded slowly. Has volunteered to run the same simulation immediately after you. He wants to prove yesterday was a fluke. That's his choice, ma'am. Dismissed, Carter. Be at the simulation bay at 1400. And Carter, Brooks added as Amy reached the door, don't die in there. I'll try not to, ma'am. Amy spent the morning in the station library. She pulled up every file she could access on advanced combat simulations, technical specs, program architecture, previous recruit performances. She read for 3 hours straight, absorbing information. Found her at noon. Amy, people are saying you're running an advanced sim this afternoon. Is that true? Yes. That's insane. You just got here, you're F tier. Amy looked up from the screen. The tier doesn't matter, the situation matters. What does that even mean? It means I adapt to what's in front of me. The simulation will adapt to me. We'll see who adapts better. Sat down beside her. You're different from other people, you know that, right? Yes. How are you so calm all the time? Amy thought about the basement on 442B, the sound of drones outside. Her grandmother's steady hands working on calculations while explosions shook dust from the ceiling. The way panic could kill you faster than any weapon. Calm is cheaper than fear, Amy said. Fear uses energy. I learned to save energy for things that matter. At 1400 hours, the observation gallery was packed. Every A-tier recruit was there. Most of the B-tier recruits, too. Even some officers had come to watch. Word had spread that something unusual was happening. Lieutenant Morgan stood in the control booth, checking system diagnostics. Everything showed green. The simulation was loaded and ready. Amy entered the bay wearing the standard combat suit. It was reinforced fabric with neural sensors woven throughout, designed to transmit feedback from the simulation directly to her nervous system. Jake sat in the front row of the gallery. He looked confident. He had run this simulation twice before and scored well both times. After Amy failed, he would show everyone what real talent looked like. "Ready, Carter?" Lieutenant Morgan asked through the speakers. "Yes, sir." Amy climbed into the pod, the interface helmet lowered, the glass cover closed, darkness wrapped around her. Then light burst across her senses. She stood on the bridge of a damaged warship. Alarms blared, red emergency lighting pulsed. Smoke filled the air. She could see 3 civilian transport ships and a swarm of enemy fighters closing in. A voice crackled through the ship's communications. "Captain, we have multiple hull breaches, weapons systems at 40%, life support failing in sections 3 through 7. We need to retreat." Amy looked around the bridge. 7 crew members stared at her, waiting for orders. She was the captain. This was her ship. These people's lives depended on her decisions. The simulation had begun. She moved to the tactical console. The screen showed the battlefield in detail. 3 civilian transports with 200 passengers each. Enemy fighters, 47, her own ship heavily damaged, 2 escort frigates destroyed. Standard doctrine was clear. Protect civilian lives at all costs. But protecting all 3 transports against this many enemies with a damaged ship was mathematically impossible. Most recruits tried anyway. They spread their resources thin, trying to save everyone. Then they watched helplessly as all 3 transports were destroyed. The simulation was designed to teach hard lessons about impossible choices. Amy made her choice in 6 seconds. Helm full thrust toward Transport Alpha. Weapons, target enemy fighter formation Sierra. Fire everything we have. "Ma'am, that leaves transports Beta and Gamma exposed," the tactical officer said. "I know, do it." In the observation gallery, Commander Brooks leaned forward. "She's sacrificing 2 transports to save 1. Most recruits can't make that call." The ship lurched forward, weapons fired, enemy fighters exploded, but the other 2 transports were being swarmed. Amy watched their shields fail on her screen, watched the hull breaches appear, watched the life signs drop to 0. 400 people dead. Jake smirked. "She's failing, this is going to be good." But on the tactical screen, something strange was happening. The enemy fighters that had destroyed the 2 transports were moving into a tight formation, regrouping for their next attack. And that formation put them directly in the path of Transport Alpha's debris field. Amy had not sacrificed those transports randomly. She had calculated their exact destruction trajectories. When the enemy fighters flew through the debris at high speed, their shields took heavy damage from the fragments. "Weapons fire on the weakened fighters, now." Her ship's weapons were damaged and low on power, but they did not need to be at full strength. The enemy shields were already compromised. The shots tore through the weakened fighters easily. 23 enemy fighters destroyed in one volley. In the gallery, the observers went quiet. Lieutenant Morgan checked his displays. That's not possible. She turned a loss into a tactical advantage. Amy was not done. Her ship had taken damage getting into position. Life support was failing faster now, but she had bought time. Engineering reroute power from weapons to shields. Helm match velocity with transport alpha, stay between them and the remaining fighters. The ship moved into a defensive position. Without weapons, they were a shield. The enemy fighters focused their fire on Amy's ship instead of the civilian transport. Shields held. Barely. Ma'am, shields at 15%. One more hit and we're exposed. Amy watched the tactical display. The enemy fighters were repositioning, preparing for a coordinated strike. 24 fighters remained. Her ship had no weapons and failing shields. Transport Alpha was too slow to escape. This was where most recruits failed. They had no more options, no more moves. The simulation would end with their ship destroyed and the last transport captured. But Amy saw something the simulation designers had not expected anyone to notice. The debris field from the destroyed transports was still expanding. Large pieces of hull were tumbling through space, following predictable trajectories based on the initial explosion vectors. She could use that. Helm, plot a course through the debris field. I'm sending coordinates to your station now. Ma'am, flying through debris at this speed will tear us apart. No, it won't. Trust the numbers. The crew hesitated. Then they followed orders. The ship dove into the debris field. Pieces of destroyed transports rushed past some scraped along the hull, but Amy had calculated the safe path precisely. The ship threaded through the debris without taking critical damage. The enemy fighters tried to follow, but they were flying in formation, optimized for attack patterns, not precision navigation. 3 fighters collided with large debris pieces. 5 more took heavy damage trying to avoid collisions. Amy's ship emerged from the debris field with Transport Alpha still safely behind them. 16 enemy fighters remained, and they were scattered and disorganized now. Engineering, how long until weapons are back online? 4 minutes, ma'am. We don't have 4 minutes. How long until we have 1 weapon online? 90 seconds. Good enough. Helm, attack vector Gamma. Ma'am, that's directly toward the enemy fighters. I know. The ship accelerated toward the remaining enemies. The fighters saw an easy target, a damaged ship with no weapons charging straight at them. They held formation, preparing to destroy it. 90 seconds. The ship rushed forward. The fighters locked weapons. 60 seconds. The distance closed. The crew watched their captain, waiting for the order to turn away. It did not come. 30 seconds. The fighters fired. The shots hit the forward shields. They buckled and failed. The ship's hull took direct hits. Alarms screamed. 0 seconds. 1 weapon came online. Fire, Amy said calmly. The single weapon fired at point-blank range into the center of the enemy formation. At this distance, the shot could not miss. It struck an enemy fighter's power core. The fighter exploded. The explosion triggered a chain reaction. 16 fighters were flying too close together. When one exploded, it damaged the others. They exploded too, one after another like dominoes falling. All 16 destroyed. The simulation suddenly stopped generating appropriate responses. Amy had eliminated all enemies, saved 1 transport, and protected her ship using tactics the program had not anticipated. The AI tried to generate new challenges but could not calculate fast enough. Error messages began appearing on Lieutenant Morgan's console. The simulation was struggling to continue. Amy did not wait for it to recover. She started finding additional objectives, hidden rescue missions, classified data that needed securing, enemy command centers that could be sabotaged, things the designers had buried deep in the code, never expecting anyone to reach them. 2 hours passed, 3 hours. Amy completed objectives that were marked theoretically possible but practically impossible. The simulation AI was learning from her tactics now, adapting in real time. It started generating smarter enemies, more complex scenarios, challenges that had never appeared for any recruit before. And Amy kept solving them, kept finding patterns, kept turning losses into advantages. At 3 hours and 47 minutes, something unprecedented happened. The simulation began generating paradoxes. Amy's solutions were so efficient that the AI could not create appropriate opposition without violating its own programming rules. The system started overheating. Processors could not keep up with the calculations needed to challenge her. Emergency alerts filled Lieutenant Morgan's console. The simulation is failing. I need to shut it down. Can you do it safely? Commander Brooks asked. I don't know. This has never happened before. On the screen, Amy was completing her 23rd objective. Standard recruits completed 5 to 7. A tier recruits averaged 12. At 4 hours and 16 minutes, the system crashed. The pod's emergency protocols activated. The glass cover opened automatically. Steam hissed from overheated cooling systems. Amy woke up in the medical bay. White lights hummed above her. Machines beeped softly beside the bed. Sat in a chair next to her, reading something on a tablet. How long was I out? Amy asked. Jumped slightly. Amy, you're awake about 6 hours. The doctors said your neural pathways were overloaded. You need to rest. I'm fine. You're not fine. You collapsed. The simulation almost fried your brain. Set down her tablet. What were you thinking? I was thinking about the objectives. There are more important things than objectives. Amy sat up slowly. Her head hurt. Her muscles ached like she had actually been fighting for 4 hours instead of lying in a pod. Did I break the system? Yes, they're still fixing it. Commander Brooks wants to see you when you're cleared by medical. A doctor entered, checked Amy's vital signs, and cleared her after 30 minutes of tests. Amy changed back into her uniform and headed to Brooks' office with following close behind. The office was more crowded than before. Commander Brooks stood behind her desk. Lieutenant Morgan was there, and 3 people Amy did not recognize wearing different uniforms, high-ranking officers judging by the insignia. Carter, sit, Brooks said. This is Admiral from Fleet Command, Captain Lewis from the Galactic Defense Council, and Colonel Park from Advanced Training Division. Amy sat, her head still hurt, but she kept her expression neutral. Admiral spoke first. She was an older woman with sharp eyes. We've reviewed your simulation results, both of them. What you did should not be possible for an F-tier recruit. It should not be possible for most A-tier recruits. I just followed the patterns, ma'am. Patterns, Captain Lewis repeated. He was a tall man with gray hair. Lieutenant Morgan, show her the analysis. Morgan pulled up a holographic display. It showed Amy's brain activity during the advanced simulation. The patterns were unusual. Normal recruits showed concentrated activity in specific regions during combat. Amy's brain showed distributed activity across multiple regions simultaneously. You were processing information on several different timescales at once, Morgan explained. Planning immediate actions, short-term tactics, and long-term strategy all in parallel. We've never seen this before in human neural patterns. Colonel Park leaned forward. He was younger than the others, maybe 40, with a serious face. Where did you learn this? 442B, sir, Amy said. The drones there attacked constantly. If you only thought about surviving the next minute, you died. You had to think about the next hour, the next day, the next week all at once. For how long? 15 years, sir. The room went quiet. Admiral pulled up Amy's background file on her tablet. She read through it carefully. Your settlement lost 47 people over those 15 years. How many of those deaths did you witness? Amy's expression did not change. 22, ma'am. Another silence. Standing by the door, looked shocked. Amy had never mentioned that before. You were a child, Brooks said quietly. Yes, ma'am. That's why my grandmother taught me to think instead of feel. Feeling didn't keep people alive. Admiral set down her tablet. We need to test you again. There's one more simulation. We call it the impossible scenario. I've heard of it, ma'am. Then you know no recruit has ever passed it. We use it to teach overconfident A-tier recruits humility. It's designed to be psychologically crushing. Looked directly at Amy. Everything goes wrong. Every choice leads to loss. Most recruits exit within 30 minutes because they can't handle watching everyone die. When do you want me to run it, ma'am? Tomorrow, 900 hours, stood. Get some rest, Carter, you'll need it. The officers filed out. Brooks stayed behind with Amy and... You don't have to do this, Brooks said. Your performance in the last 2 simulations has already proven your capabilities. But they still think it might be luck, Amy said. They need to see one more time. This isn't about proving anything to them. This is about whether you can handle what they're going to show you. Amy stood. I've been handling impossible situations since I was 7, ma'am. One more won't break me. That night, Amy could not sleep. She lay in her bed staring at the ceiling while snored softly across the room. The medical staff had given her something for the headache, but it only dulled the pain. Her mind kept working, processing, planning. She thought about the impossible scenario. She had read about it in the library. The details were classified, but rumors spread among recruits. A damaged ship, dying crew, civilian transports under attack, limited resources, no good choices. It was designed to force recruits to make terrible decisions and then watch the consequences. The psychological impact was severe enough that the Academy required counseling sessions after every run. Amy had made terrible decisions before. She had watched people die because of choices she made, or choices she did not make. That was life on 442B. You learned to live with guilt or you did not survive. At 700, she gave up on sleep. She got dressed and went to the station's observation deck. The large windows showed Earth below, blue and white and peaceful. Somewhere down there, people were waking up to normal days, jobs and families and problems that did not involve life-or-death decisions. Amy had never had a normal day. She was not sure she wanted one. Couldn't sleep either. Amy turned. Jake stood behind her, hands in his pockets. He looked uncomfortable. No, Amy said. Jake walked to the window and stood beside her. I was going to run that advanced simulation after you. I wanted to beat your score. I know. I didn't run it. I watched you complete 23 objectives and break the system, and I realized something. He looked at her. You're not better than me because you're stronger or faster. You're better because you think differently. You could learn to think differently. Maybe, but I don't have 15 years of surviving killer drones to train me. Jake shook his head. I'm sorry for making fun of you, for calling you weak. I was wrong. Amy nodded. Thank you. Are you really running the impossible scenario today? Yes. Why, you've already proven yourself. Because they're giving me the chance, Amy said, and because I want to see if I can. At 900 hours, the observation gallery was even more crowded than before. News had spread throughout the entire station. Recruits from all divisions attended. Officers who had never watched simulations before came to see what would happen. The Galactic Defense Council had sent representatives from 3 different species. They sat in a special section, their translation devices humming softly. Amy entered the simulation bay. She wore the combat suit again. Her face was calm. Her hands were steady. But watching from the gallery could see something different in her friend's eyes, a hardness that had not been there before. Lieutenant Morgan met her at the pod. Last chance to back out, Carter. I'm ready, sir. Listen to me, this simulation will try to break you. It will make you choose who lives and who dies. Most people can't handle that. If you need to exit, just press the release. There's no shame in it. I understand, sir. Amy climbed into the pod. The helmet lowered, the glass closed. Darkness, then light. She stood on a damaged bridge again, but this time everything was worse. Fire burned in 3 corners. There was cracked. Bodies lay on the floor. Only 2 crew members were still alive and both were injured. Through the broken, she could see 4 civilian transports. The display showed 1,200 passengers total, and approaching fast, a fleet of enemy ships, too many to count. Captain, one of the injured crew members, gasped. We're dead. Weapons are offline, engines at 20%, life support failing everywhere. The communications system crackled. 4 different voices, the captains of the civilian transports, all talking at once. Begging for help, screaming, crying, children crying in the background. The simulation was designed to overload the senses, to make thinking impossible through pure emotional bombardment. Amy closed her eyes for 3 seconds. She blocked out the screaming, the fire, the fear. She breathed slowly. Then she opened her eyes and started working. Helm, calculate minimum power needed to position us between the transports and the enemy fleet. Engineering, reroute everything non-essential to engines. Captain, that includes life support. Do it. The crew looked at her like she was insane. They followed orders anyway. The ship moved sluggishly into position. It was a shield again, but this time the shield was made of paper. One hit would destroy them. In the gallery, observers watched the enemy fleet approaching. Admiral leaned toward Brooks. She's going to sacrifice her ship to buy time for the transports. Standard doctrine, but it won't work. The transports are too slow to escape. On the screen, Amy was doing something strange. She was not trying to evacuate the transports. She was not calling for reinforcements. She was studying the enemy fleet composition on her flickering display. Communications, broadcast surrender on all frequencies. Ma'am, do it now. The crew hesitated then. The message went out. This is Captain Carter of the Human Defense Ship. We surrender, requesting terms. The enemy fleet slowed. Their formation changed from attack to capture. This was unexpected. Human ships did not surrender easily. Jake, watching from the gallery, frowned. Why is she surrendering? That's not like her. But Amy was not surrendering. She was buying time. While the enemy fleet repositioned for capture instead of destruction, she was working through calculations on her damaged console. Enemy ship types, power signatures, formation positions, communication patterns, everything was data, everything had patterns. The enemy fleet sent a response. Surrender accepted, power down all systems and prepare to be boarded. Acknowledged, Amy said, then she turned to her crew. Helm on my mark, full power to engines, ram vector alpha. Ma'am, that's suicide. Trust me. The enemy ships got closer. They were moving carefully now, not expecting resistance. Their formation was optimized for capture, not combat. That meant their most powerful ships were in the rear and their boarding vessels were in front. Engineering, transfer all remaining power to forward shields, everything. Ma'am, that will kill life support completely. We'll have 3 minutes of air. We won't need more than that, Mark. The ship's engines roared to full power. It lurched forward directly at the enemy formation. The enemy fleet, expecting a powered-down vessel, scattered in surprise. Amy's ship did not try to hit the boarding vessels. It drove straight between them toward a specific point in the enemy formation, a weak point she had identified in their positioning. The enemy flagship was protected by smaller vessels on all sides, except one angle. Amy's ship hit that angle at full speed. The forward shields held for exactly 8 seconds, long enough to reach the flagship. The ship rammed into the flagship's command section, breaching the hull. The collision destroyed Amy's ship. Everyone on her bridge died instantly, at least in the simulation. The pod registered her death, but the scenario continued. That was part of the simulation's cruelty. You watched the results of your choices even after failing. Except Amy had not failed. The enemy flagship's command section was destroyed. Without coordination, the other enemy ships began operating independently. Their formation fell apart. Some ships tried to continue the attack. Others tried to retreat. Several collided with each other in the confusion. The civilian transports, no longer under organized attack, managed to activate their emergency FTL drives and escape. All 4 of them. All 1,200 passengers saved. In the gallery, silence. Then Lieutenant Morgan's console lit up with errors. The simulation could not process what had happened. No recruit had ever won the impossible scenario by dying. The victory conditions and failure conditions had triggered simultaneously. The AI tried to continue. It generated new enemies to attack the escaped transports. Amy's consciousness, still connected to the simulation somehow, watched this happen. She realized she was still in the neural link even though her character was dead. That was not supposed to be possible. She focused on the data streams flowing through the simulation. She could see how the AI was generating challenges, following its programming rules to create impossible odds. And she found the flaw. The AI had to follow rules. It could not create scenarios that violated its own logical framework. Amy started feeding it paradoxes, situations where following one rule required breaking another rule. The system began generating errors faster. It tried to create harder challenges, but each challenge violated its programming. The cascading errors spread through the simulation architecture. At 23 minutes, the simulation crashed completely. Not just stopped, crashed. The pod systems shut down to prevent damage. Emergency releases activated. The glass cover flew open. Amy gasped for air. She was alive. In reality, she had never stopped breathing. But the simulation had convinced her brain she was dying. Medical staff rushed in. but Amy held up a hand, stopping them. She climbed out of the pod herself, shaking but standing. Lieutenant Morgan stared at his console. Every screen showed critical errors. She didn't just break the simulation, she broke it so thoroughly we'll need to rebuild the entire program from scratch. Admiral stood in the gallery, her expression unreadable. Captain Lewis and Colonel Park looked stunned. Commander Brooks came down to the simulation bay. She walked directly to Amy. "How did you survive death in the simulation?" Brooks asked. "I didn't survive," Amy said quietly. "I died, but the simulation kept running, so I kept working. Dying doesn't mean stopping." Brooks stared at her. "You solved an impossible scenario by accepting that you would die. Then you crashed the system from inside the neural link while technically dead." "Yes, ma'am." "That's insane." "That's survival, ma'am. On 442B, we learned that winning sometimes means accepting losses. And if you're going to lose anyway, make sure your loss accomplishes something." Admiral joined them. "I need to speak with the council representatives. Carter, you'll wait here." Amy nodded. She sat on the edge of the pod, her legs still shaking. Brought her water, she drank slowly. An hour passed, then 2. Finally, Admiral returned with the council representatives and the other officers. "Carter, stand," said. Amy stood, her legs more stable now. "The Galactic Defense Council has reviewed your performances, all 3 simulations. They have also reviewed the combat tier assessment system." Paused. "The system is flawed. It was designed to measure capabilities based on predatory species instincts. It completely fails to measure what humans like you represent." One of the alien representatives spoke, its words translated through a device. "We have witnessed something unprecedented. This human broke our most advanced training systems through methods we did not anticipate. She does not fight like any species we have encountered." "What does this mean, ma'am?" Amy asked. "It means," Admiral said, "that we're creating a new classification, not F-tier or A-tier. Adaptive Specialist. It's for recruits who excel through pattern recognition and systematic thinking rather than traditional combat metrics." Colonel Park stepped forward. "We're also offering you a choice, Carter. Multiple divisions want you. Special Operations, Strategic Command, Advanced Tactics Development. You can choose any of them." Amy was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I want to teach." Teach looked surprised. "Yes, ma'am, there are other recruits like me. People who score low on traditional metrics because they think differently. I want to help them." Brooks smiled slightly. "That's not what most recruits would choose after breaking 3 simulations." "I'm not most recruits, ma'am." Admiral considered this. "Very well, you'll be assigned to the training division. But Carter, understand this. What you did over these 3 days will be studied for years. You didn't just pass impossible tests. You proved that our understanding of combat capability was incomplete." "I just did what I was taught, ma'am. Survive, adapt, keep thinking even when everything seems lost." The officers dismissed her. Amy walked out of the simulation bay for the last time, hugged her in the corridor, crying with relief. Jake was waiting too. "You're going to teach?" "Yes." "Can you teach me?" Amy looked at him. The arrogance was gone from his face. He looked genuine. 3 days passed before Amy was cleared to return to regular duties. The medical staff wanted to make sure the neural overload had not caused permanent damage. The tests came back clean. Her brain showed unusual activity patterns, but those patterns had always been there. They were not damage. They were adaptation. Commander Brooks spent those 3 days reviewing everything they knew about Amy Carter. She read the full settlement reports from 442B, casualty lists, incident reports, supply manifests that showed a community barely surviving. The picture that emerged was clear and terrible. Amy had not just survived dangerous situations. She had grown up in a war zone that never ended. The automated defense systems on that planet had been designed to eliminate all human presence. They were remnants from a conflict nobody remembered, still following their last orders decades later. The settlement had survived through pure determination and intelligence. They could not outfight the machines. They could only outthink them, day after day, year after year. Amy had been 7 when she arrived with her parents. She was 9 when she watched her parents die in a drone strike. She was 11 when she started helping her grandmother calculate safe routes through the patrol patterns. She was 15 when she personally led a rescue mission to save 3 children trapped outside the settlement walls. By the time she was 22, Amy had survived more combat situations than most career soldiers. Not simulated combat, real combat where mistakes meant death. Brooks closed the file and looked out her window at Earth below. The Academy's tier system had marked this girl as weak, as incapable of combat, because she showed low aggression and minimal stress response. The system had not measured capability. It had measured trauma response. And Amy had learned to survive by controlling her trauma response so completely that it registered as weakness. On the fourth day, Brooks called Amy back to her office. Admiral was there again, along with several other high-ranking officers Amy did not recognize. One was clearly alien, its four arms folded in a posture that might have been contemplation. "Carter, this is Counselor Vex of the Galactic Defense Council," Brooks said. "It represents the coalition that designed our combat assessment system." Counselor Vex's translation device hummed. "We have reviewed your background extensively. We owe you an apology." Amy stood at attention. "Sir, our assessment system was created by species who evolved as predators. We measured combat capability through aggression, competitive drive, and stress response. These metrics work well for most species in the galaxy." Vex's posture shifted. "But humanity presents a unique challenge. You did not evolve as pure predators. You evolved as persistence hunters and tool users. Your combat capability comes from different sources." Admiral picked up the explanation. "We've been measuring human recruits wrong from the start. We've been rejecting people who score low on predator instincts without recognizing that humans have other strengths." "The simulations proved this," Counselor Vex continued. "You succeeded not through aggression but through pattern recognition, systematic thinking, and the ability to maintain rational thought under extreme pressure. These are distinctly human traits that our system failed to value." Brooks pulled up a holographic display. It showed Amy's 3 simulation runs side by side with typical A-tier performances. "Look at the difference. A-tier recruits solve problems through direct action. Attack, defend, overpower. You solve problems by understanding systems and finding leverage points. Both approaches work, but they're completely different." "We found something else interesting," one of the other officers said. This was Dr. Martinez, head of the Academy's research division. "We compared your neural patterns to historical data from Earth, specifically from human survivors of extended crisis situations. Refugees, disaster survivors, resistance fighters. The patterns match." Amy remained silent, listening. "Your brain learned to process threat on multiple timescales simultaneously," Dr. Martinez continued. "This is a survival adaptation developed by humans who face ongoing danger. Most species don't develop this because they either defeat threats quickly or die. Humans persist. You survive impossible situations by thinking your way through them." Counselor Vex leaned forward. "We are reforming the entire tier assessment system. It will now account for different types of combat capability. The changes will affect every species in the coalition." "Because of me, sir?" Amy asked. "Because of what you represent. You broke 3 simulations designed by the galaxy's best military strategists. You did this not through strength or speed, but through a form of intelligence we had not properly valued." Vex paused. "You have humbled us. That is valuable." Admiral stood. "We've also made decisions about 442B. The colony has been surviving alone for too long. A military detachment will be sent to clear the automated defense systems permanently. Your settlement will finally be safe." Amy's expression flickered for the first time. "My grandmother is still there." "We know she'll be protected. The operation begins next month," smiled slightly. "We also reviewed her engineering records. She's brilliant. We're offering her a position here at the Academy if she wants it." "She won't leave the settlement, ma'am. It's her home." "Then we'll make the settlement safe enough that staying there is a choice, not a necessity." Brooks brought up new information on the display. "Now, about your teaching assignment. We've identified 47 recruits across all divisions who scored poorly on traditional metrics but show potential in other areas. They'll be your first class." 47? Amy looked surprised. "That's a lot." "There are probably more. These are just the ones we identified in the current recruit population." Brooks changed the display to show profiles. "They come from different worlds, different species. What they have in common is that standard training methods don't work for them." Amy studied the profiles. One human woman from a colony that had survived 3 different wars. an alien from a species known for being peaceful, who had somehow survived pirates killing his entire family. A young man from Earth who had lived through the Pacific floods. Each one had trauma. Each one had learned to survive by thinking instead of fighting. "What do you want me to teach them, ma'am?" "What your grandmother taught you," Brooks said. "How to think when fear is trying to shut down your brain, how to see patterns in chaos, how to turn weakness into advantage." "I'm not sure I know how to teach that." "You taught yourself, that's enough to start." Counselor Vex stood. "There is one more thing. The combat simulations you broke have been preserved. We are studying them to understand how you think, but we want your permission to share them throughout the coalition military." "Why, sir?" "Because other species need to understand how humans approach impossible problems. Your simulations will become case studies in human strategic thinking." Vex's translator produced something that might have been a laugh. "You are 24 years old and have already contributed more to military theory than most officers do in entire careers." The meeting ended. Amy left Brooks' office and found waiting in the corridor. "How did it go?" asked. "I have 47 students starting next week." "That's amazing. Are you scared?" Amy thought about it. "A little. I've never taught anyone before." "You taught Jake. He's been telling everyone you changed how he thinks about combat." "Jake is learning fast. He just needed someone to show him different approaches." They walked through the station together. Other recruits nodded respectfully as Amy passed. The mockery was gone. Now there was curiosity and respect. She had proven that being underestimated was not the same as being weak. Lieutenant Morgan found them in the mess hall. "Carter, you've been approved to access the simulation bay whenever you want. No scheduling required. Commander Brooks thought you might want to develop custom training scenarios." "Thank you, sir." "Also," Morgan added, "I've been assigned to assist you with the technical aspects of teaching. If you need help programming simulations or analyzing student performance, I'm available." "I appreciate that, sir." After he left, grinned. "Everyone wants to help you now. It's weird how fast things changed." "They didn't change," Amy said. "People just see me differently now." "Isn't that the same thing?" "No, I'm still the same person I was when I scored F-tier. The only difference is now they know what F-tier actually meant. It meant surviving 15 years on 442B. It meant learning from my grandmother. It meant adapting to stay alive." Jake joined them at their table. He had a data tablet and looked excited. "Amy, I've been reading about pattern recognition in combat scenarios. Can I ask you some questions?" "Sure." "When you're in a situation, how do you decide what information matters and what's just noise?" Amy thought about how to explain it. "You look for things that repeat. Machines repeat because they follow programming. Humans repeat because they follow habits. If you can identify the repetition, you can predict what comes next." "But in the advanced simulation, the enemies were adapting to you. How did you handle that?" "Adaptation follows patterns too. They adapted based on my previous actions, so I changed what actions I showed them. I made them think I was doing one thing while actually doing another." Jake scribbled notes on his tablet. "That's incredible. I never thought about it that way." Laughed. She's going to have a line of students wanting her advice before she even starts teaching. Amy spent the next week preparing. She studied teaching methods. She reviewed each student's file carefully. She designed simple exercises that would let her assess how they thought. Most importantly, she visited the simulation bay every night. She programmed scenarios based on her own experiences, not the dramatic battles from 442B, but the quiet moments. The decision about which route to take when drones were patrolling, the choice between moving fast or moving carefully, the calculations about risk versus reward. On the first day of class, Amy stood in a small training room facing 47 recruits. They were all ages, all species. What they shared was the same look she had seen in a mirror 3 weeks ago, the look of people who had been told they were not good enough. "My name is Amy Carter," she said. 3 weeks ago, I scored F-tier on the combat assessment. I was ranked lowest combat capability in my recruit class." The students looked surprised. They had heard about her simulation performances but did not know about the F-tier ranking. "The tier system measured me wrong. It probably measured many of you wrong too. It measures predatory instincts, aggression, quick reactions. Those are valuable skills, but they're not the only valuable skills." She pulled up a display showing a simple scenario. A maze with a target at the end and obstacles in between. Standard training would teach you to fight through those obstacles, to overcome them with strength or speed. Amy changed the display. I'm going to teach you to see the system, to understand why the obstacles exist and how they relate to each other. Once you see the system, you can find ways through that don't require fighting at all. A human woman in the front row raised her hand. Her name tag read Martinez. But what if fighting is necessary? Then you fight smart instead of hard, Amy said. You use the environment, you use timing, you use the opponent's own strength against them. Fighting is sometimes necessary, but it should be the last option, not the first one. She ran them through the exercise. Most students tried to force their way through the maze. A few started to see the patterns. By the end of the first session, 3 students had found solutions that required no combat at all. Good, Amy said as class ended. You're starting to think differently. That's the hardest part. The rest is just practice. Over the following weeks, Amy developed her teaching style. She was patient and clear. She never raised her voice. She showed students how to stay calm when simulations became intense. She taught them that fear was information, not a failure. Her students began performing better in standard training, not because they became more aggressive, but because they became more efficient. They made fewer mistakes. They adapted faster. Commander Brooks observed one of Amy's classes after a month. She watched Amy guide a struggling student through a complex scenario, breaking it down into simple components. You're a natural teacher, Brooks said afterward. I'm just showing them what I know. That's what teaching is. Brooks pulled up performance data. Your students are advancing faster than any comparable group in academy history. Some of them have moved up 2-tier rankings already. The tiers don't really matter. They matter to the people who scored low on them. You're giving them a different way to understand their own capabilities. Brooks smiled. The council representatives want to expand your program. They're talking about creating adaptive specialist tracks at every training facility in the coalition. Amy looked surprised. That seems excessive. It's necessary. You proved that we've been wasting potential because we measured it wrong. Changing that across the entire coalition will take years, but it starts with programs like yours. 3 months after Amy began teaching, her grandmother arrived at the station. The military had cleared the automated systems from 442B faster than expected. The settlement was finally safe. Carter was 83 years old with white hair and hands that never stopped moving. She hugged Amy for a long time in the docking bay, neither of them speaking. Finally, stepped back and looked at her granddaughter. They tell me you broke their simulations. 3 of them. Only 3, I taught you better than that, smiled. Show me your classroom, I want to see what you're teaching. Amy took her grandmother through the station. She showed her the simulation bay, the training rooms, the students' progress reports, absorbed everything with sharp eyes. You're doing good work, said. These kids needed someone like you. I'm just teaching them what you taught me. No, you're teaching them what you learned by living it. That's more valuable than anything I could have shown you. Touched Amy's cheek gently. I'm proud of you. Your parents would be proud too. That night gave a guest lecture to Amy's class. She explained the mathematics of pattern recognition, the engineering behind reading system behaviors, the psychology of staying calm under pressure. The students listened like they were hearing secrets of the universe. In a way, they were. Carter had kept 200 people alive for decades using nothing but intelligence and determination. She knew things about survival that most military officers never learned. After the lecture, Jake approached. Ma'am, how did you stay so calm for so many years? Weren't you ever afraid? Laughed, afraid, every single day. Fear is good. Fear keeps you alert. The trick is not letting fear make your decisions for you. How do you do that? You remember that fear is just your brain trying to keep you alive. Thank it for the warning, then make your choice based on information, not emotion. She glanced at Amy across the room. My granddaughter learned that lesson better than anyone. She was terrified for 15 years, but she never let the fear control her. 6 months after Amy began teaching, the academy held a formal ceremony. The combat tier assessment system was officially reformed. New categories were added. New metrics were implemented. The changes would affect millions of recruits across hundreds of worlds. Admiral gave a speech about adaptation and growth. Counselor Vex spoke about learning from mistakes. Commander Brooks announced that Amy's training program would become a permanent part of Academy curriculum. Amy stood on stage in her dress uniform, uncomfortable with the attention. When they called her forward to receive a commendation, she walked slowly, still moving like someone who did not want to be noticed. For exceptional performance and contribution to military training methodology, Admiral read from the official document, Amy Carter is hereby recognized as the founder of adaptive combat theory. Her methods will be taught throughout the coalition. Her simulations will be studied for generations. Applause filled the hall. Amy accepted the commendation and returned to her seat as quickly as possible. Later at the reception, found her hiding near the refreshment table. You should be celebrating. You changed the entire military's approach to training. I just wanted to help some students, Amy said. You helped more than some students. You helped everyone who ever felt like they weren't good enough, smiled, including yourself. Amy thought about that. 3 weeks ago, she had stood in a testing hall staring at red letters that said she was lowest tier, the weakest, the least capable. Now those same letters were gone, replaced by a system that actually measured what mattered. But the real change was not in the system. It was in how people understood capability. They understood now that strength came in many forms, that being underestimated could be an advantage, that survival often required thinking rather than fighting. Jake approached them looking nervous. Amy, I have a question, a personal one. Okay. Would you be willing to help me develop a training program for A-tier recruits, something that teaches them your methods? You want to teach A-tier students to think like F-tier survivors. Yes, because what you do works better than what we do. And I think if we combine both approaches, we'd create something really effective. Amy considered it. All right, but only if you promise to actually listen to the students who struggle, the ones who score low but might be thinking on levels we don't measure yet. Deal. The reception continued late into the night. Amy slipped away early and went to the observation deck. Earth turned slowly below, blue and peaceful. Somewhere down there, people lived normal lives. Somewhere up here, 47 students were learning to survive impossible situations by thinking differently. And somewhere between those two places, Amy had found something she never expected: purpose. She thought about the little girl who had hidden in basements while drones hunted overhead, about the teenager who had calculated safe routes through hostile territory, about the young woman who had been marked as weak and incapable. That girl was still inside her, still quiet, still careful, still watching patterns and calculating risks. But now that girl was teaching others, showing them that weakness was just strength measured wrong. That being underestimated meant being undervalued, and undervalued assets could change everything. Amy smiled slightly and touched the cold glass of the observation window. Outside, stars filled the darkness, infinite and beautiful, each one a system, each system full of patterns, each pattern waiting to be understood. She had broken 3 simulations by seeing what others missed. She had changed a galaxy's approach to combat by surviving when everyone expected her to fail. But her real achievement was simpler than that. She had taken her grandmother's lessons, learned in blood and fear and determination, and shared them with people who needed them. That was worth more than any commendation, worth more than any tier ranking, worth more than breaking every record in the Academy's history. Amy Carter, formerly F-tier, lowest combat capability, turned away from the window and headed back to her quarters. Tomorrow she had a class to teach. 47 students who needed to learn that sometimes the strongest thing you could do was think instead of fight. And she would teach them, not because she was special, not because she had broken simulations, but because someone had once taught her, and passing that knowledge forward was how survival became legacy. Her heart rate, as always, stayed at 72 beats per minute. Calm, steady, ready. The galaxy had ranked her lowest. She had proven them wrong, not by becoming what they wanted, but by showing them what they had failed to measure. And that, she thought as she walked through the quiet corridors, was the real lesson, the one worth teaching. Stay calm, watch patterns, think differently, survive. Then teach others to do the same. I can try, she said. That night, Amy finally slept. She dreamed of 442B, of drones and basements and her grandmother's steady hands. But this time, when she woke up, she did not feel afraid. She felt ready. Amy sat up slowly. Her face was pale, sweat soaked through her combat suit. For the first time since arriving at the academy, she looked tired. Lieutenant Morgan rushed to help her out of the pod. "Are you all right?" Amy nodded, but when she tried to stand, her legs gave out. The neural feedback had exhausted her body even though she had not physically moved. Morgan caught her before she fell. Medical staff were already running into the bay. They helped Amy onto a stretcher. 23 objectives, Commander Brooks said quietly. She completed 23 objectives, and she broke the simulation. Jake sat frozen in the observation gallery. His simulation run was scheduled to start in 15 minutes. He looked at the smoking pod, at the error messages covering every screen, at Amy being carried away by medical staff. He stood and walked out without saying a word. He did not run his simulation that day. Nobody did. The system needed 2 days of repairs. Behind them, Lieutenant Morgan pulled up Amy's full file on his tablet. He read through her background, his expression growing more serious with each line. When he reached the section about 442B and the automated defense systems, he understood. This girl had not just trained for combat simulations. She had survived real ones for 15 years. Commander Brooks stood beside him, reading over his shoulder. "We need to test her again," she said. "This was not beginner's luck." "What level simulation?" Brooks thought for a moment. "Advanced combat, the one we use for tier recruits." "That's too much, she'll get hurt." "No," Brooks said, watching Amy disappear down the corridor. "I don't think she will." Amy closed her eyes. In her mind, she could still hear the drones from home, the patterns they flew, the systems they followed, the ways they could be beaten if you just paid attention. The Academy thought their simulations would break her. They had designed them to teach humility to overconfident recruits. But Amy had never been overconfident. She had been surviving impossible situations since she was 7 years old. Tomorrow they would learn what that meant. She fell asleep with her hands relaxed at her sides, her breathing slow and steady. Her heart rate never rose above 70 beats per minute. It never did.